throughout the Revolution. Never even heard of those guys. And then if you even move to the last battle of the American Revolution, the Battle of Yorktown, certainly we're going to hear about the young General Marquis de Lafayette, but we don't talk about the other guy standing there right in the painting with him, and that's James Armistead. James Armistead is the hero of Yorktown. He's the first double spy we had in the American Revolution. It's because of what he did that we were able to trap the British, cut months off the Revolution, save countless scores of lives. James Armistead, hero. We just haven't heard these guys before. So there's so much of our history we don't hear, and I don't say this lightly. I've been appointed by a number of state boards of education in several states to help write the history and government standard for students in those states. I know what's in the textbooks, but I also know what's in history because we've got so much of the stuff, we read so many of the older books. And so as you go back to John Adams, why would John Adams point to preachers and say, well, these are the guys that we can look to that were so influential in American independence? Well, it's because when you read the Declaration of Independence, and by the way, that's a great thing to do, is read the Declaration of Independence. Rarely do we do that. We're often told that the Founding Fathers did the Declaration of Independence because taxation without representation. That's why they birthed America. They didn't like what was going on economically, so taxation without representation, here we are today. That's okay as far as it goes, but the problem is the Declaration of Independence listed 27 reasons that they separated from Great Britain. Taxation without representation was issue number 17 out of the 27. It didn't even make the top half of what concerned them, and that's the only one we focus on. We have so bored into economics being everything that a nation is that we've missed so many of the moral and religious aspects that have been out there really for centuries. So when you look at the Declaration of Independence, you look at those 27 clauses, you look at the rights that are set forth in the Declaration of Independence. Historians have documented that every right set forth in the Declaration of Independence had been preached from the American pulpit prior to 1763. And you know what that means? That means the Declaration of Independence is nothing more than a listing of the sermons that we've been hearing in church for the last couple of decades leading up to the Revolution. That's what the Declaration is. And so when you look at these individuals that we celebrate on the 4th of July that gave us this Declaration of Independence, our birth certificate, it's kind of fun to see how they got their start. If you'll go to any public library or just go online, you can read the records of Congress, the records of everything that's gone on in Congress. And if you'll go back to page 1, you'll see the very first time that these founding fathers got together. The very first session of the very first Congress of the United States, September the 6th, 1774. And if you'll read in the records of Congress, you'll say, oh, look, they opened with prayer. And you keep reading, you say, that wasn't a dinky little prayer, was it? No, it wasn't. According to historical records, some records indicate that the opening prayer session in Congress ran up to 3 hours long, just in the opening prayer session in Congress. Now, it was such a significant time, and so many delegates wrote about it, that you take someone like Silas Deane, he said that after that time of prayer in Congress, he said even the stern old Quakers had tears running down their cheeks. And the Quakers are the least likely to cry. That's why they're called the stern old Quakers. Even they were crying after that time of prayer in Congress. And it wasn't just a time of prayer. You see, John Adams specifically said that in Congress that morning, he told Abigail, he said in Congress that morning they had Bible study. They studied 4 chapters of the Bible that morning in Congress. And he said that God so spoke to them in 1 chapter. God so changed what they saw by reading that 1 chapter out of the 4 that they had the faith that, maybe we can defeat the British in the coming conflict. So he wrote a letter to Abigail, and he said, Abigail, you got to see this chapter that we had this morning in Congress. And he told her very, very bluntly, he said, Abigail, I must beg you to read that psalm. He said, read the 35th Psalm to your friends, and then read it to your father. See, Psalm 35 is what God really used to change their whole perspective that morning. And he said, Abigail, I want you to read it. Then I want you to show it to all your friends. Then I want you to show it to your dad. And her father was the minister of their church, Reverend William Smith, who was preacher of their church. He said, you got to let everybody know what we did in the Congress this morning with the 35th Psalm. Man, we didn't know they had a Bible study, much less that God spoke to them out of that Bible study. And on top of that, he said, Abigail, that's not all. He said, Abigail, he said, we've appointed a continental fast. We've got 3 million people in America back then, and we've called all of them to a day of fasting and prayer. And he expected good things, as he told her. He says, millions will be upon their knees at once before their great Creator, imploring his forgiveness and blessings, his smiles on American council and arms. He said, can you imagine the impact of having 3 million Americans, the whole nation, pray and fast before God? Now, that started a tradition of congressional prayer proclamations. It was the first of 15 congressional prayer proclamations, and that proclamation was for a time of fasting, humiliation, and prayer. We got real needs, so we're serious about going to God and say, God, we humble ourselves and we're fasting and praying. We got to have your intervention. Well, if you're going to be proper about the thing, You expect God to answer your prayers. When you get serious about praying, you want God to answer. And if you're